Biden administration's American Rescue Plan has been underway since earlier this year.
Has it though?
Let me clear my throat. Okay, so well, so what's the happen? What do you think the Biden administration? What's going on with the American Rescue Plan? There have been some. Well, you tell me.
I think it's a good plan. Well, the plan that came from the House, you know what I'm saying, was a good plan, but President Joe Manchin is doing what he does. You know what I mean?
Not President Joe
Manchin.
He
control everything right now. That's the president. It ain't Joe Biden. It's Joe Manchin. President Joe Manchin, who likes to stop everything that's happening. He likes to obstruct and then get on Face the Nation and act like he's trying to be partisan. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the same playbook every single time. And this is where I say, again, when we talk about Democratic messaging, if I was the Democratic Party, every single time he's on Face the Nation, whatever show comes on right after Face the Nation or whatever segment is next after him, I'm going to be on there right after that. Like, no, check this out. This is what's happening. Because this is the craziest thing about Joe Manchin. He is one of the few senators that almost everything he votes against is against what his constituency wants. So it's not like he's saying, I'm voting against these things to benefit my constituency because this is what they want. He's even voting against his own constituency's best interest. And we know, honestly, it's probably tied to that dark money, which is why he don't want that dark money in the new voting rights bill. You know what I mean? But we'll get to that. But even he don't want environmental and education tapped into the infrastructure bill, when we know that technology is a part of the new infrastructure. And this is one of the issues you have when you still have old white men controlling the tables, right? Because anybody under 80 should know and understand how technology is now a huge part of infrastructure as far as having free internet across the country, especially what we dealt with in COVID and kids been out of school, internet access, access to other technologies in the home that we don't have, that we're supposed to be put in this infrastructure bill. He's trying to strip it down to basically the old school infrastructure, just streets and signs and roads. And it shouldn't be that. The infrastructure bill, this one, should include all of those things, including some of the things they have for jobs that he wants to take out of the bill. And again, all of the things that he wants to take out are things that the constituencies in his district need, and that they are for, and that they have approved, and that they will vote for. So I really don't understand, why at this point Joe Biden hasn't hemmed them up like Lyndon B. Johnson did, back in the day, hemmed them up in the bathroom and told them, like, look, if you don't get on board all that illegal shit your daughter doing, yeah, we about to go get her ass. Like, you got to do something at this point, especially if you say.
But Biden's not the one gonna get him, Dame. Biden's not gonna be the one that deals with Joe Manchin. You already know who they sending in to deal with Joe Manchin.
Pelosi.
Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
That's who they sending in to deal with Joe. Listen, she said point blank, we got a bill. We in reconciliation now. Okay? We in reconciliation. Let's see what you about to do in this reconciliation. Let me see what you gonna try to play when we have to combine these bills. Okay. So the reason, and let me say this to you also, Dave, I do believe Biden, if it comes to that, Biden will come down and we're going to see a different change or tune in Joe Manchin. But this is the reason why Joe Manchin is so mad. And Kaya, this is why I don't have to be politically correct with your viewers. Joe chose a nigga twice. Period. That's the bottom line of it. That's all it is. You can wrap it in a different boat. You can call it something else. You decided to sit behind a black man the first time. And the second time you chose what we feel like, regardless of how black people see her or not, a black woman. And now you want to put her up as the face of the party? Crack her ass, you outside your mind. Okay? That's the bottom line to Joe Manchin. So yeah. we can strategize. We can talk about the numbers of his constituency. We can talk about how, he could be Republican and switch to. We can have every high level debate we want to. But that's the bottom line of it. You have to remember that Joe Manchin and Joe Biden served in that Senate together for a long time. You have to remember that Joe Biden and Joe Manchin come from the same geographical area and had some of the same geographical concerns when they served in that body. You have to remember that Joe Biden and Joe Manchin got some of the same money from the same donors while they were in that chamber together. And so the way that Joe Manchin sees Joe Biden is a turncoat, sellout, a nigga lover. And if that's who you're going to be, I'm going to make every and any decision that you make difficult. Do you know why? Because when we get down to a tiebreaker vote, I got to look at that black heifer at the top of the chamber who's going to break the tie. And I'm livid about it. And that's the bottom line.
Do you think there's going to be a shutdown? Do you think there's going to be a lock?
I think at some point it is. I think at some point it's going to have to be, because not only is Joe Manchin stopping this infrastructure bill, he's stopping the voting rights bill, he's stopping the police reform bill. That's why I say he's President Joe Manchin right now. Like every single thing that the party ran on, everything that the platform, he's stopping all of it, which is in turn going to make the Democrats lose the midterms. Like you see the play clearly. He's stopping everything. So when the midterms come, they can say, like black people already they ain't doing shit, and rightfully so. So then when the midterms come, because people want to talk about it with nuance, well, that's because it doesn't matter. It's not getting done. So then by the time the midterms come, we'll lose seats because things aren't getting done, and that also means Democrats going to lose the next presidency because of it. So just keep an eye on what Joe Manchin is doing, because he's an undercover Republican and he's working for them right now, and he's doing a damn good job.
So let me say this, Kaya. It's historically known that the president's party, that whoever holds the presidency, that in the midterm they lose seats, right? Mm-hmm. So it is already understood that inside the House there should be a loss of seats. Here's where we have to really, really think about this, is reapportionment. Because we have to remember that in this midterm, we are looking at potentially a new map because of the census of 2020. So we have this midterm is far more nuanced. And I think that what the Republicans have done, Dame, in many ways to hurt themselves is all of these state voter ID laws and all of this obstructionist at that level, because it's going to galvanize a group of people in a way that even if they're not pleased with Democrats, that they do not see Democrats as actively stripping their right to vote. And so that I don't think that we're going to see the same level of shellacking at the midterms. So that's one thing. The second thing that I think that we have to think about when it comes to this dynamic of the midterms, the play out of Joe Manchin is, I don't think there's going to be a shutdown. And the reason, we may be up to the last minute, but I think we'll get a CR, which is a continuous resolution. And I think that we'll get a CR that allows us to govern for a while without setting a new budget. And here is why. Is because the Democrats have the Senate, they have the House, and they have the presidency. It is not going to then politically bode well for you to have a shutdown when there is no party that's controlling one of the branches of government. At this point, the Democrats, even if in a slim margin in the Senate, which is why President Joe Manchin, as you said, Dame, has this level of power, it's razor thin in the Senate, but the Democrats still hold control. And at the end of the day, I put it like this: at the end of the day, Joe Manchin's money is not going to keep flowing if there is a shutdown, because it's going to make it difficult for Democratic donors all over the map if there is a shutdown. So I don't think there's going to be a shutdown. I think we're going to get to the umpteenth hour. I think we're going to get to the last minute, and then they'll pass a continuous resolution that allows the government to stay open. But those are the things that I think that we have to take into consideration when we're thinking about the Joe Manchin piece, when we're thinking about the redistricting piece, and then the reapportionment piece, when we're thinking about midterms, and we're also thinking about a potential shutdown.
So I want to pose a question. Around Labor Day, the U.S. Department of Labor put forth the numbers, and the numbers in terms of jobs that have the job numbers were significantly lower than what was expected. Can you please help us understand what does that mean, and where are we in this country in terms of employment?
So to me, the biggest issue that we will not have a conversation about is that you have permanently, in many ways, or COVID has permanently, in many ways, alienated a group of mothers. I mean, a group of their working force, and that's mothers, and in particularly mothers of color. When you have COVID raging as it is, and you have small children, we already know that parental care and caregiving is then the responsibility in a natural gender role setting of the woman. So what does that then mean? That then means women have to find different ways to work or to try to bring in income, and cannot return to the workforce in the ways that they had naturally been doing it, for two reasons. Number one, they need to be able to be available to their children or to the people that they care about, that they have to nurture and care for, whether they be elderly or ailing parents, ailing family members, or the children on either end of life spectrum. And you have to think about the fact that many of these women were in retail positions that have now contracted inside of the new labor force. So the biggest conversation that we are not having is, why are we looking for people to work? Why is McDonald's still looking for people and trying to have signing bonuses and everything? Because the largest grouping population in the country is between the ages of 19 and 44, right? They make up almost 36% of the United States population. They are the ones that are of working age, or able-bodied, as my grandmother would say. Well, more than half of that population is women. And if they are women with small children, or children that are not of grade school age, or if they are taking care of family members that are ailing and sick because of this pandemic, you have permanently trapped them out of the labor market.
That's a good point. But leading up to the pandemic, there was a serious issue with Black men in employment, and just Black men, in terms of Black men not going to school, Black men just dropping out of being a productive citizen. What are your thoughts about what needs to be done, or what's going on with Black males, Black men and boys with employment? And I am signaling you out as a Black male panel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one thing, and this is not a vast majority, but what you saw was a lot of Black men realized they made more money in unemployment than some of the jobs that they had. They made more money with some of the PPP loans that went out, because I seen a few hood cats balling out with that 20 grand that they got for the PPP loan. But also, I feel like we need more resources allocated to the neighborhood for these Black men, and allocated to trades, because that's one of the things that have left our neighborhood, have left our communities, and that's where we used to live. Like, we used to live in shop, car, what is it called? The car club at Washington High. We had wood shop, we had electronics, we had so all of those things are gone. Printing. Printing. We had printing, like all of those things are gone. A lot of the vocational things that we had that were the bread and butter of Black men in the neighborhood who were not college educated have left our neighborhoods. So those things have left our neighborhoods, but the Black men who generally would have taken those jobs were still there. We all knew a great hood mechanic. We all knew a good t-shirt printer. We all know, and all those things. And a lot of those guys learned those things back in high school. Mm-hmm. Now that we have lost a lot of the vocational skills, you have a whole section of young Black men who are literally lost right now. That, it's the section that are the undereducated Black men, the Black men who didn't go to college, or the Black men who just made it to junior college. That's the big section and big chunk of people that I think you're seeing that are unemployed at this time. And we are, I think we dropped again in the amount of education below Black women, the amount of educated men and the amount of degrees that we have behind Black women. So that's also an issue, which that also to me goes to resources in high schools, resources in our neighborhoods in regards to education and getting us educated.
But David, that directly affects the census, right? Like, that is directly tied to the census, right? That by not counting one person, it's a loss of $2,000 a year for 10 years by not counting one person. That's a loss of 20 racks for just 1 year, right? It directly affects it. It lets a district know, okay, how many kindergarten classes do we need because how many people are coming to kindergarten? Like it directly affects. So the reason I get frustrated with our community is like, you don't want the system, you don't want the man, you F this, you F that. But the exact measurements that are needed to say that you exist, you don't want to participate in, and then you also are mad about the man. So to me, it's a miseducation, right? And I talk about this all the time with my students. I say to them, this is your democracy. And let me tell you why it's your democracy. Because Black people are the people in this country who have consistently made white folks live up to the creed. So it's your democracy. The Electoral College, it's your Electoral College. Why? Because the Connecticut Compromise said we were going to take two plans, which is why Joe Manchin gets to be President Joe Manchin right now, because we decided that to protect slavery, we were going to have two ways to then get representation: the Senate, that's even, and the House, that's proportional. And so that proportionality is based upon you and the 3/5 compromise, right? Because slave owners didn't want to have a 2-for-1. They didn't want to have two slaves and get one piece of representation, which is why they took two slaves, put them together, and got 1 1/5 representation. So the Electoral College is built off of you. This is your democracy because you're the one who's pushed it. You are the one that they argued the most about, and it's now manifested itself. So my thing is that we have to educate them about pushing their system to then make it respond to them. And when it doesn't respond to them, hold these MFs accountable and get them out of office.
Well, I have to push back on that because historically, Black people have a long list of taking people to task, of checking all the boxes, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, and the system has not come through. So how do you tell these young folk, this is your democracy, when there's a whole history of it failing, this democracy failing them? We have got to do something differently, because if the census is in another 10 years, what we going to do in these 10 years?
And I also think that's, I think, and to your point, Kaya, I think that's another point, another piece of what you're seeing with Black men is the amount of disenfranchisement that has been going on with us, to the point where you had a lot of Black men turning to Trump. You know, in this last election, you still have a lot of Black men turning to hyper conservative views because of disenfranchisement. So I think that's a big part of it too, and that's something that has not been talked about enough and has not been discussed enough, because that is a huge part of, you know, seeing that, okay, they said vote Warnock in and and then we'll have the Senate and things will get done. We'll get the George Floyd bill. We'll get the whole police accountable. We'll get the Voting Rights Act, and we'll get to, you know, get our vote will be counted. And then what happens? We vote and everybody said vote in, and then President Joe Manchin is like, nah, we're not passing none of that shit. So then you got Black men who are like, see, this is why I told y'all not to vote for Joe Biden. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I was going to say, to me, it's gotten even more so after Biden has got elected. This hyper conservatism that you're talking about. I want to even add to that is that I've just seen this trend. This is, I would say, within the last 10 years of me teaching at the university, this idea, in particular with young Black men, that they can take what I would call the Gates or the Bezos or the other guy, the model, or this technology and thug it out and bootstrap it and blah, 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 and then build this big tech platform or
it don't work like that for us.
It does not work like that, right? Especially people knowing now that Gates and Bezos and all these people and Elon Musk are coming with millions of dollars already from their families. Yeah. Right. So for me, that has become so problematic because there is this misperception of like wealth building and, you know, this idea, you know, and so it has caused, in my opinion, it has caused more for young Black men to have more dissonance.
What's the Kanye-nization? The Kanye-nization.
Yeah, in terms of participating in what you were talking about, Sherise, participating in citizenship, participating in civic duties, totally not connected. There was a recent report that just came out, I think like a day or two ago, saying that there's a mating crisis at the university level, that's saying all men, regardless of what their racial backgrounds are attending college in lesser numbers, which is causing the inability for a lot of women who want to be in heterosexual relationships, the ability to find a husband, because, that was one of the reasons why, you went. So as much as, these laws, this legislation, and these movements, by GOPers or conservative Democrats are making, the Bob Marley term, when it rains, it does not fall on one man's house, is what you're seeing. It is impacting across the board, whatever it is you're going through.
But Kaya, I guess that's my point. The cognitive dissonance is by design, right? The cognitive dissonance is by design. It is to get you to say, the system ain't did nothing, the system has not done nothing, I shouldn't participate, et cetera, which is why I'm desperately trying to get this piece published. I need it for tenure in a journal, but I want to write a more simplified piece, right, for just regular consumption, about the use of Westphalian sovereignty. And the use of Westphalian sovereignty to then say to Black people in particular, you are not worthy inside of the citizenship paradigm. You are never worthy of citizenship. And so by doing that, Kaya, what we're really having a conversation about this cognitive dissonance is about the fact that the way that the state has been organized globally requires Black people to consistently fight about them being seen as citizens in regardless of what country they're in. Right. And so when Black men come and tell me, well, that's why I didn't vote her, that's why this is a global issue. This is not a United States issue. This is not a Haitian issue. This is not a Liberian issue. This is a global framework. White folks created the state based upon their level of control that has now had a global effect. So when you say to me that I am not participating in a system that I helped build, meaning my ancestors helped build, because I haven't seen an immediate result, and an African in Nigeria who has a Black government is literally fighting the same thing, I have an issue with that. Because this is not a United States problem. This is a global problem from understanding your worth and your ability to participate in any government in any country in the world.
So, Dave, you had to say something? You want to say something?
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to, which I totally understand, because that's the effects of imperialism, and that is the effects of white domination and control on a global level. But on a local level, for like folk in Compton and Oakland, you know what I'm saying, and in Miami, let's talk about. I think the magnitude in which COVID, the pandemic shut down, and all the shortages that have taken place, the magnitude, we are still wrapping our heads around it. So when we're talking about jobs, right? There's this myth that people don't want to work. Several things for me that I look at is that one, prior to the pandemic, the average worker in America was heavily exploited. And for some people, the pandemic was the first time that anybody had ever had a break. And a lot of people realized just how much that they were working and how much that they were being underpaid for their work. That's one of the responses of why people will be like, I will rather wait until I almost starve before I go back to work. That's one of the responses. Another response is there are people who truly want to go to work, but because the transportation system is messed up, Uber is hella high, Lyft is inconsistent, you can't go to work consistently, right? You know what I'm saying? That's a lot of the local economies. People might have worked at the corner store or something down the street where they could ride their bike or work. All of those things have shuttered, right? or they're operating in these skeletal type of capacities. So we have got to really figure out in the economy what we're going to do, because the SBA right now is giving out money to these businesses, right? And the businesses are just using the money to stay open. But when you don't have anybody to sell your stuff to, because nobody's going to work, what is the end game with the economy? I don't know what the Biden administration is going to do, because part of that American Rescue Plan was to put a lot of money in businesses with this idea that the local economy and the local businesses would, then foster, the communities to stay afloat. I don't think that's working. I don't know what's going to work.
Well, also to put a button on that, Kaya, too, in regards to the jobs, one of the things that people have realized, and you talking about essential workers, when I say essential, I don't just mean nurses and doctors. I mean essential workers like the people who were working in grocery stores, the people who were doing the day-to-day things to keep us going during the pandemic. They have, like you said, realized they weren't getting paid enough, because you remember all the truck drivers were like, we're not driving trucks over there. A lot of the grocery store workers were like, we're not getting paid enough to be around all these sick people every day. So they quit. So you had a lot of those everyday jobs, those tumultuous jobs that people had. A lot of people left those jobs and start either being entrepreneurs, side hustles, driving for Lyft, ironically, driving for Uber. Because like I know somebody, they was like, they wanted me to come to work. It would have took me $25 to get there for Uber, and I would only have like 2 hours. So I basically would have made $50 after my $75 paycheck that day, because they cut my hours. So guess what? I'm gonna drive Uber and just get $25, taking 3 people going to get their $75. You know what I mean? So you're seeing a lot of that is what's happening. And I think that's a part of it as well.
Oh, we can't hear you, Sherise.
Hear me now?
Yep.
This speaks to the fact that we were not prepared for the shift in the economy, right? The tech economy was upon us. We didn't prepare for it. And because we haven't prepared for it, we don't really know how to react to it. And the bigger thing, I think, about this not ability to react to it is that we demonize the people who've decided and understood the value of their labor. We have demonized them and now have made it that they are the problem inside of the system, when in actuality, the problem is that we have allowed, from a policy perspective, there to be this trickle down effect that we knew never worked.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. I mean, especially when you have these reports coming out of all these people who made money during COVID, all of these millionaires and these billionaires that were created during COVID, and you have people still struggling. And there's also now an issue, and like you said, the little people are the ones who are being affected, right? Mm-hmm. You have people who refuse to move out of housing, and so now you have somebody that might have a house or two for this residual income. Now they don't have that. They're losing their homes. There is a domino effect economically that is happening. And I don't know exactly where it's going to go or what it's going to look like, but there's a lot of changes. And this is where we do have to hold ourselves accountable in terms of how do we address it and what do we need to do to put things in action? Because all of us have little babies or younger kids. And what is this world going to be like for them? Which moves to my question of infrastructure, right? Which is this, there's going to have to be some massive infrastructure plan that has got to be enacted to give people jobs, and to boost the economy. That's one of the things I think is going to happen. I don't know about you all. I wanted to move towards, if you don't have anything else to say about the economy, there's a lot to say about it. And we could keep that conversation going in future podcasts. But what about COVID? What do you think has been the administration, which is connected, which we said, to the economy? Yes, right? Yes, the response to COVID. I think also what complicates, what also, in my opinion, from what I've reported, is people are feeling some type of way about the mandates, about the vaccination mandates. It's like, wait a minute, especially like essential workers. You made me work in these high risk conditions this whole time. Now you're telling me that you're going to fire me because I am weighing my options whether I get a vaccine. And there are people saying that I'm not being a patriot or I'm not being responsible because I'm making this decision. So that's just one of the many things in terms of the response to COVID. And there's a lot of legal issues. A lot of people aren't talking about the nurses, the firefighters, and the cops are some of the biggest contenders are saying you should not mandate a vaccine for me to work.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Kaya, because I think I want people to understand that the mandate is also about the economy. And let me explain why. The mandate is about the economy because the biggest thing that everybody, especially those economists, don't want to happen again is another shutdown. Another shutdown would probably completely collapse America's economy. And the last thing that they were waiting on was for that vaccine to be approved by the CDC, the FDA, right? They were waiting for the vaccine because now they no longer had the excuse of, oh, well, it's not approved, because the moment it became approved, and this is just my take on it from watching what the economists have been saying, from hearing what the administration is saying, basically, I'd rather you niggas die than give you another $2,000 for free. Mm. And because we have the vaccine now, you have no excuse not to go back to work. You cannot use, and they were like, we're not going to shut down. We just going to choke out everybody who's not going to take the vaccine. So we don't have to shut down because this is their fallback. They get to fall back on, well, we don't have to shut down because there's a vaccine. We don't have to shut down because there's an FDA approved vaccine that everybody can take to be safe. That way the economy will never have to shut down regardless, no matter what. And that's why the mandate is connected to the economy.
And let me add this, a lot of, in terms of people producing fake vaccination papers, I think there's this idea that it's people who look like us, but a lot of these people are showing up at colleges, you know what I'm saying? These people, they're not looking like us, right? This is a really, the story, this is as a news person, my position is that the story should be full and robust and it should be told on both sides. It will always be problematic for me, regardless of whatever side I'm on or whatever thing I think is right, is that one side is always told. But when we're talking about how do we create a better America or a healthy America when we move on, this goes back to what you were saying, Sherise. Why does the onus always have to fall on the people who are at the bottom, right?
Because remember, they started trying to blame us. They started trying to put, for a high second, they were trying to make us the face of anti-vaxxers on Fox News. With Nicki Minaj, like for a hot second, even one of the senators was saying like we were the face of anti-vaxxers. So you're right. Somehow the onus gets put on us, even though we aren't the ones who are in control of the vaccinations. We aren't in control of giving out the cards. We aren't in control of any of those things, but yet somehow they kind of tried to make it our fault that a lot of white people weren't getting vaccinated.
So I think that we have an origination problem. And what I mean by that is that because this virus was politicized from the very beginning, we are just seeing the fallout of that politicization. I don't believe in any way we're even really arguing about a vaccine or a mask. I think that we're arguing about our political rights that we see are being infringed upon inside of a system. I just think that the vaccine is the football that is being used, if that makes any sense.
Right.
I don't in any way think that anybody who's done enough research, who understand how it works, who sees, the Black people, especially that are responsible, because you talk to Black nurses and Black doctors, they are begging folks to get these vaccinations, right? Because of what they have to see every day, what they have to deal with. If we think about the young lady who's responsible for the vaccination inside of the CDC, she has done countless her name is Dr. Kamikia S. Corbett. She's from Herter Mills, North Carolina. She's been all over every media outlet trying to encourage people, right? And she looked like us. Ain't no doubting. The only reason that you could think she, She wear I think she wear like a straight wig or something, but she blackity black. Like ain't no mistaking. She black. I mean, she black. I mean, there ain't no mistaking it. She's been all over trying to encourage people to tell people, listen, right, without being partisan. A lot of the research stopped when Trump got in office. We've been doing research on this vaccine and been looking at this vaccine since Obama created a task force, when the Zika broke out, right? Like, so this whole idea that we got a vaccine out of nowhere is not true. We've actually been doing a whole lot of research. The research was paused because the federal government is the person with the most amount of money who could continue said research. Research got paused, and when it started back up, by that point, technology had increased so much. China had done a lot of work at the World Health Organization that we were able then to get vaccines inside of people faster because of the amount of technology on how to build a vaccine had changed rapidly in 4 years, right? And the way that she explains it is the kind of same way we talk about phones and how you switch out a phone every year, right? If you lose the technology cycle is 6 months. If you lose 4 or 5 years and the technology cycle is every 6 months, how many iterations have you really lost, right? That's how she goes about explaining it and all that. So if anybody who does research and understands the progression of it makes the decision and still makes the decision not to get vaccinated after they've understood the process and have done some education, that's one thing. But most of the people that are talking about they're not taking it haven't done any of that level of research.
They research is TikTok.
They research is TikTok. They have not listened to the experts on this that are of varying hues of colors of people. They are not in the trenches. Like Aia said, the people that are coming out that are saying these things are people that are entrenched in a political ideology that says that my freedoms shouldn't be infringed upon. And then Black people or people of color are then being used as the scapegoat for this political football of freedom and liberty here in the United States. And to me, that is the story that we are not talking about, that Black and brown folks are being scapegoated because this issue was politicized from the very beginning. And because it was politicized from the very beginning, these white folks are carrying out the remnants of that politicization of COVID from the very beginning.
I also have to add at the same time, there's such a politicizing things, I think, has just become part of drinking water in the United States. Everything is political. So even the way in which we understand and consume news has become political. And so I think that's also part of the issue is that a lot of us, this is why Ark Republic was started. There were only maybe about 3 or 4 spaces or sites that people thought were credible because they were constantly pumping out all this information. And so a lot of
information.
People, yeah, exactly. And it was partisan
information on both sides. I agree.
And so it, to me, trained and programmed a lot of people not to have like built to assess.
I would say built a bunch of echo chambers, right?
Exactly.
It built people watching news for bias, like you watch news
for validation,
to validate what you already think, not to get new information. A lot of people now watch, like if you watch a Fox News, you watch a Fox News to validate your conservative values. If you're watching CNN, you're watching it to validate your liberal. So it's not anything that's down the middle. That's literally just giving you the information and letting you decide.
CNN I would argue that CNN is more neutral, right? They are definitely left leaning, but they're far more neutral than MSNBC is.
Yeah, I say they're more neutral, but I still think the conversation shouldn't even be more neutral when we're talking about news.
I'm sorry, like when Don Lemon goes on there and says that nobody vaccinated should be able to go into a restaurant to eat or go to a grocery store. To me, that's very partisan.
Yeah.
That's actually very dangerous, in my opinion, if we talk about what citizenship is in the United States. I also want to say, though, because of, this is to your point, Dane, because of the lack of being able to have all of this diverse streams of information, how we process it and how we understand it as a whole and as a collective, to me, has decreased, which has become the problem and has become a simple argument as we don't do enough research. But how can we do enough research when people's channels are getting taken down and people are like, so even in people like, hey, let's have a discussion about what this looks like. What are the ramifications on a health, a global health, a community health, public health, economic. Right. Let's talk about all of this. You have these like hardcore banging on wax perspectives, which has resulted in the breakdown of even family structures. You know what I'm saying?
Right, but Kaya, to me, that's BS, because just because you can't have the conversation on social media doesn't mean that you can't have the conversation. I mean, this Black folks have been organizing in homes and communities for years, having conversations. We may not be able to communicate with ease, the same level of ease that we do about what the social construct finds to be acceptable. Yes, it may be more difficult to mass communicate on social media, but it didn't stop a bus boycott because Black folks got to each other in each other's homes. To me, this talks about your level of commitment. Your commitment to go find a Kaya, to go find the Dame in your communities. They're there. There are people that are there inside the communities that have been doing the work. They're there. It's the fact of how many people are coming to Dame to come talk about the issue.
I was gonna say, but
they want to argue with him on social media to look like a certain.
Well, thank you. Way. So that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say the reality is though, like, yes, you're correct that we have been in those communities. We have been having those conversations. But the reality is social media personalities have been taken over for news, right? Like the personality that you agree with has been taken over for the actual news. And I think that's kind of what Kai's point is.
Right, because I wasn't talking about social media. That is the problem. Social media, like you said, has become the news stream that a lot of people use in order to understand news, and don't go on to a goddamn website or don't.
Like literally somebody will take, and that's why I try to be careful. Somebody will just take, if I put a headline up and there's no article, they just take the headline and they gone. They going to town off the headline. No
but to me, my thing is saying, but we have to hold people's feet to the fire for that. We need to hold people's feet to the fire for doing that, regardless of what the information is. I ask people all the time, you quoted this. Where did this come from? Who wrote it? Where did you get it from? Like,
well, and I agree with that, but also to Kaia's point, and this goes back to what we said earlier in the conversation. You have a lot of Black men and some Black women, but mostly a lot more. I've seen more Black men that have been sharing white supremacist sites to make their point about being anti-vax. And I think that goes back to talking about the Black men who were supporting Trump, right? Because now that has bled over into this part of the conversation, because somebody shared something with me and I was like, do you realize that dude is, not only is he an anti-vaxxer, he was an anti-COVID. He just said before he was an anti-vaxxer 3 weeks earlier, he said COVID was a hoax. So now you have Black men sharing that COVID was a hoax from white supremacist sites, like, yo, you sending me links from Breitbart and Tucker Carlson, you know what I mean? But so that to the point of when I'm talking about bias, the bias is so strong that you will align yourself with some shit that you have no business aligning yourself with just for confirmation bias. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with news from CNN to Fox right now is everybody leaning into that confirmation bias.
Yeah, I would never give credit to CNN. But let me say this, if you want to talk about studies, I would say roughly about 2012, there was a study done on natural crises in Twitter. And in 2012, because people were trying to really understand the whole social media landscape, they usually leaned on somebody that they felt was a credible source who was disseminating the information. And that has stood until COVID. COVID, everybody became an expert, one in COVID.
Well, honestly, I would say that has stood until Trump, because fake news, when he brought fake news into the zeitgeist, I think that's when it happened, because you could literally take some factual shit and just be like fake news and it will work. It would really work. Like if you ever watched Jordan Klepper when he would talk to the Trump supporters on the Daily Show, you would really see like, yo, there's really an alternate reality of the cult of personality of Trump. Like, and you talk about cognitive dissonance, it is on display so many times right in front of you. And then I think once COVID hit, it exploded.
And I think we keep saying cognitive dissonance. I think we need to break down what cognitive dissonance is. Like, I think we're making an assumption that everybody understands what that is.
Okay, what is it then?
Well, I mean, we've said cognitive dissonance is being separated from the reality that's happening around you. For instance, I've heard people say in response to COVID, I am not going to, I don't trust the government, which is why I'm not going to get the vaccine, which is why I'm waiting for the FDA to approve it. Well, if you don't trust the federal government, the FDA is the Food and Drug Administration that's ran by the federal government. So waiting on the FDA to then approve it, to take it, is an example of cognitive dissonance.
Okay. Look,
Good explanation. Go ahead, Kaya. What's on your mind, baby?
yeah, I mean, I would say the for me, the Trump era for me brought about this volatile, how do I say it? Partisan politics became extremely violent, maybe again, because it was violent back in the day. I think for me, what COVID did was COVID to me made the fractures that existed even more obvious. I'm still trying to understand it and figure it out. But for me, I have a huge issue when, so taking what Sherise said in terms of we have these community people and institutions where you go to where are considered trusted sources of information. I would say that in COVID, those trusted sources of information now exist outside of our communities, which it makes me very uneasy. And on top of that, these spaces that we used to have where we could thug it out and talk it out are now, to me, breaking down.
And been infiltrated purposely. Because you got to remember, like they was talking about Russia, and you go back to what y'all saying about China, there was a specific disinformation campaign set towards Black folks that a lot of us ate up and hit hook, line, and took it, hook, line, and sinker. So that's also part of it.
But that's why I say this whole COVID thing is connected to to the politicizing of it from the beginning. We politicized things before, but politicizing a global pandemic that's affecting not just one country, but every country in the world is something totally different than politicizing who's right or wrong about the water that's in Flint. That's how the politicizing COVID right. to me, to politicizing COVID to me, what it then does, politicizing COVID while democracy is already fragile, right? Mm-hmm. We are seeing a decline in democracy globally, right? What is democracy at the base level? It is self-governance, right? Mm-hmm. Self-governance. And if it's self-governance, if we stop trusting ourselves, then self-governance breaks down. So what I'm saying to you is that the reason that COVID is to me the biggest offender of politicization is the idea is that we cannot trust ourselves anymore. There is no place for us to go to even trust ourselves. And democracy is based upon self-governance. So if democracy is the bedrock or the foundation foundation is self-governance. If we have no place to trust ourselves about what's affecting us or what's happening to us, then the mode in which we govern ourselves completely breaks down.
These were all excellent points. Thank you. You know, I love chopping it up. I'm always look forward for us having different opinions and being able to, come back and laugh and talk about how we need to move forward. So thank you for that insight.
See good news. Yeah. you don't see on regular TV. From another perspective, something relative to your needs. And we gonna have deep subjects, and we gonna turn the lens. And there's no topic we won't skip, so please don't